So, welcome. Today on the Less Matters podcast, we have the one and only Vodde, co creator of Less, all round nice person, so I hear. He's here to spend some time with me going through some of the questions that I'm looking to ask as many of the Less trainers that will oblige over the next coming 12 months. So, um, I won't go into a huge amount of detail bars on kind of who you are and what you've done. Because I'm gathering a lot of people already know who you are, and if you're listening to this podcast, you're going to be familiar with some of the great books that Bars has written with Craig Larman. But Bars, if I throw it over to you and say, how would you like to introduce yourself to perhaps those listeners or watchers who don't know you so well?
Okay. I'm someone interested in building products and been spending my time figuring out how I think that can be done best and been sharing that. Would that do as a super short introduction? Or do you want the background of I went there and then did that and
Do you know what, Bars, you've spoken about the background, I think, in other podcasts and videos. Um,
every
Do
time?
you think people want to hear that again? Has
No.
it changed since the last time you told everybody?
Well, I guess the newish thing is that I'm back in Europe. I'm living around the corner from you, with a bit of a lake in between. Um, but that hasn't impacted that much yet because before I left Singapore, I was mostly locked down, and here in Europe, I've been mostly locked down, and that's
Are you still
unfortunate.
going for the world record for the person that has been locked down the longest?
Let's not bore our our listeners with it any further.
um, so I just want to thank you, I suppose, before we get into the questions, because I think, Buzz, I've known you now for maybe 8 years, which feels like such a long time when I say it out loud. But you were my first mentor in the less environment, and you were so kind to me, kind of inviting me over to your one of your courses in Germany and getting to know you and kind of taking on that less trainer journey. So it's a certain amount of nerves on my behalf here to be kind of doing this kind of formal style interview with you, but also very flattering. So thank you very much for taking the time. It is really appreciated, and hopefully at some point, when things calm down, I'll be able to come over and see you in your new hometown.
Yes,
So,
that would be
so
good.
there are a number of questions that I look to ask each of the less trainers. These are designed predominantly for people who haven't co-created the less framework. So let's see how well they apply to you. So question number one: what is your elevator pitch for less?
I've been thinking about that, and I guess I don't have even one. Um, I don't know. Most of the elevator pitches feel too silly, and I think I'd rather not be like buy this attitude with less. So, and I guess for myself working with organizations, usually it's like, yeah, let's try to figure out what the real problems in your development are, and see if um, my experience and less with that can help with that, rather than trying to adopt the solution that will solve all of your problems.
I think that's quite nice in many respects. I think elevator pitches are quite salesy. Um,
Yeah.
which is why, because I was asked this question on a course recently, and I wasn't sure how to answer it. And my initial attempt at an elevator pitch ended up being much like Ahmad's, the guy, the less trainers on the previous podcast, where he spent his elevator pitch. I think it was maybe quite many floors in this building because it was quite a long elevator, I seem to recall. Um, essentially, telling people why they shouldn't use less. Um, which is an interesting approach, and it's kind of what I always end up saying. So I like what you're saying about understanding the problems and not kind of jumping straight to the solution.
Yeah, yeah, and then less is or originally mine and Craig's experiences tried to formulated experiences, and now I look at it more as the the less communities formulated experiences in trying to create simpler and more sane product development.
Also, perhaps
It's,
that's quite a
it's
nice
like
elevator
almost
pitch.
an elevator pitch by now. Huh?
Yeah, I think we're getting there. I mean, a bit simpler and more sane product development. I think. I mean, I'd buy
Yeah,
it, as opposed to complex and less sane product development.
that
Which,
seems to be
again,
common though.
yeah, I think that's the de facto statement, isn't it? Okay, so question number 2: did you choose less, or did less choose you?
um, I don't know. I think neither of those. Right? We and I think you've heard this story before, but we had no intent of ever creating less. So I guess less chose us then, um, because both me and Craig just enjoy building products, and or originally for me it was mostly, way back it was just enjoy building products myself, writing code and all of the things that comes with building a product. And from there it was like, hey gosh, with one person you can only get this far. Let's think a little bit about, if I got a team of people, how can we work together best to build products? And then it was like, oh wow, with one team you can only get so far. So how, as a larger organization, etc. But all our focus has always been on just, yeah, working in teams, trying to figure out how to um, build more valuable products for customers, and change the flexibility part, changing that the direction whenever needed. Um, and at some point, Craig said to me, "Let's put some of our you know things that we've done. Let's write some of those down." And we started writing books, and people started reading them, and they liked them. And then at some point, we we especially with the huge amounts of nonsense related to scaling happening um, in the world and in the community, we said, okay, yeah, I think it's time to package all of our things into something slightly more um, prescriptive, slightly more adoptable, where also other people like you and Ahmad and the other less trainers can join us and try to take our and all of the other trainers' experiences and improve the product development. Um, so I guess that means less chose us.
And with that, what you're saying, about using the experiences and talking about the previous question as well. Do you think there's ever a time that you see less becoming more open source?
Isn't it?
I would say that there's. I wouldn't say that less is open source. I wouldn't say that it's entirely closed, but I don't think we've seen that many changes to say the rules or the well, so maybe that's it. I mean, what are we talking about here? When I say open source, are we talking about you've got contribution to the experiments and perhaps contribution towards the guides, but then when it comes to the rules and the frameworks, it feels like there's an element of like it opens up the further you get outside of the bullseye.
Yeah.
So
But wouldn't that be similar to an open source product, where probably in most open source products, the core of the product rarely does get much changes, and the surroundings tend to get more changes. But like
But
if I would compare that, I actually do maintain some open source projects, as you know, and most of there's very rarely contributions that, you know, in this case a test automation tool, for example, that would change the actual test runner, the core of how you run the test. It doesn't change much.
But for example, if that we haven't seen much change, let's say when you go onto the LeSS website and you look at the surrounding elements to technical excellence, for example, and some of the things that are included within technical excellence, there hasn't been any noticeable evolution on those on the content of those pages, perhaps, or contributions. I mean, one of the things that I know we've spoken about, I think something like briefly maybe a year or so ago, but around less huge and product ownership and the product owner team. You know, I think there's probably some really good stuff out there which could be contributed. And are you saying that it's not the fact that it hasn't evolved isn't because it can't? It's just the fact that contributions aren't being made.
No, I don't think so either. I think the main contributions and are within the case studies, where people are, you know, sharing their experiments. And what is lacking still is the the ability to move experiments out of case studies or contribute to experiments in a structured way. But if you look at like the rules, the rules ended up being rules as, you know, elevated experiments from, you know, the very beginning of when we started to work in this way. So therefore, I would expect that if we have a better way of contributing experiments, then the changes to the rules would only happen rarely, since it's, you know, if you wish, the core of the system, and would only happen when an elevated experiment, when we say, you know, this experiment, we've started considering it fundamental, right? And you see that already a little bit, like the multi-team refinement being, you know, more emphasized than 5 years ago or so, and so there's aspects that are changing, but they're coming out of the experiences, and in LeSS we'd like the experiences to be documented in experiments. And what is so the contributions are there, but what is definitely lacking still is the structure to be able to take the experiments out of case studies, take the old experiments and have them available in a structured way. And that's what I think could be significantly improved.
Is that something on the backlog, or is that in the moment consideration?
It's I think it's always been on the backlog, and let's hope it will not always stay on the backlog.
Yeah, what's the age of that item, Buzz? And if people, and before we move on to the next question, if people out there have case studies that they would like to share, is it only people that are candidate less trainers who then become trainers who can publish case studies, or is there other mechanisms by which people can contribute their own lived experiences with using less?
Um, I as the actual case studies, I don't think you need to be an candidate trainer to contribute a case study. However, we do want to keep the current uh, bottlenecky process for reviewing case studies, because a lot of um, case studies, once you dig a little bit deeper, you'll notice that it's not really what the case study doesn't really describe what it is. So therefore, we have a fairly thorough um, review process that tends to change the case study significantly. And I do think that's what we want to keep. And that I think that also relates very much to your first question, where we want the case studies not to be salesy, but we want the case studies to share experience.
Yeah. So I would love to, for that bottleneck to be, for the capacity to be increased for the like simultaneous reviews, or for the throughput to be increased. Because I know that it's something that people that come on my courses do often ask is, where are the new case studies? Like, where can we find the latest information? And I think that because of the, um, not because of the rigor, but because of the elapsed time
Yeah,
in getting the case studies out there, I think that they at times they perhaps lose some of their relevance, because by they of course everything's out of date at the moment, it's kind of out there anyway, but I think that there's sometimes that elapsed time does make them less relevant than perhaps they could be.
that I don't know, but we've as you know, we've attempted to increase the quality of the case studies through the candidate trainer mentoring, and therefore now usually whenever people write case studies, they work with a mentor, and then some of the mentors are great, and some could be better mentors. But the effect of some of that is that the case studies coming in have been already of a much higher quality. But also they've been just much bigger. Like if I look at the pipeline right now, there's 2 or 3 over 100-page case studies in the pipeline. And usually I only need to I'm the if you wish the sanity checker usually for the process. So I only get to read them once and then say yes or no. But even that is already taking a lot of time when you get a case study of what was the last one that hopefully will be published this year. Let me have a look. What is the uh, uh, I'll be misusing the fact that I'm in an online environment. Yeah, it's 150 something. It's just insane.
Wow,
Um,
that is a lot. That is a lot.
but they're good, and they're to link that back to the open sourceness. There's a lot of uh, good experiments in there, and I think they contribute a lot. But they do need to be in a bit more, in the future, in a bit more what's the word, consumable way, because now they'll end up
Yeah.
as a one-page HTML document on the left side, and it's not perhaps the best form.
No, but the case studies are brilliant, and I think I'm guessing that there's always room for improvement, and I have loved going through case studies, um, but I'm sure that I could need some improvement. So yeah, any feedback would be more than welcomed. But I really love that process of working with a candidate trainer, going through the case study, getting to learn more about the different contexts and the experiments and their struggles. It's a very enjoyable process. I do very much enjoy it. Haven't done it now for a year, so
I'll need to
I'll
I'll
await the
need to
next one.
hook you up with some new mentees then. Huh?
Please do, please do. I do. I thoroughly enjoy mentoring. What's the one thing above all others that you love about LeSS?
I'll change the question a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
because about less itself is it's good and interesting. I can answer that, but much more interesting is the thing you enjoy about being in a less adoption, and that's just the energy the teams can create once you are in and unfortunately we haven't had the co-located where you can just feel that where you have just all the teams sitting together and they're just working together and the boundaries between the teams become unclear. They just collaborate so smoothly. You see people enjoy that and you feel the constant learning happening between the people, and being able to create that environment uh, whenever you're there and you're feeling that and you're seeing that. I think that's the most enjoyable part.
Mm. It reminds me of something that Peter Senge said on one of his videos about creating, meaningful team experiences. I think that's what I picked up from what you were saying there. It's like having that real enjoyment, the joy, the learning, the progression, being able to observe that firsthand.
Yeah, it's
And so then this is a
it's just like in a good less adoption when the teams are sitting close together, it's just so chaotic and noisy from the outside, but if you're in there, it's just so focused, but it doesn't look focused from the outside, but it is from being there because you're just aware of what's going on and what you're trying to achieve and who's working on what and where and how you can connect and um, so whenever I have that and I'm able to then step back and observe that, then I I'm at those moments I usually find them most enjoyable and the most interesting parts of less, being able to create that, I guess.
is there one particular adoption where those at the moment sticks out for you the most?
Not necessarily, although the one I was in before moving to Netherlands and before being locked down and in front of a screen all the time at one of the banks was one where there were moments where it was like, wow, this is very nice. And unfortunately, it's not proceeding anymore. I do hope there will be a case study from that. But it's one of those cases where a lot of people where we worked with then, they've actually ended up leaving, and they're now looking to repeat that same thing in another company again. Um, I always feel, it's hard because on one hand, it didn't proceed anymore within that company. So from that perspective, eventually after a while, you would say it wasn't successful, and at the other perspective, and the one that I find more important is it has impacted the people who were part of that so much that they go somewhere else and they're kind of seeking for repeating that or repeating implementing part of that.
And that's the one thing that I've found consistent, I think, when I've worked with organizations adopting it less or just looking to use parts of it. It's the organization will get some benefit, but the real impact seems to be the broader systemic effect on people's lives and the things they go off and choose to do afterwards, and how they carry that torch on with them, looking to trying to recreate or improve upon what came before. And I've not, and it's a reasonably, unless I think, because there isn't a, as an individual, you're not going to go off and pay to become a trainer and then make a ton of cash off your case study and training people how to do it like in a very short period of time. I think lots of people's motivations for doing this are slightly more altruistic and just based upon the enjoyment that they got from being in the environment, rather than it being a way to make a few pounds or euros or dollars or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Which I think is nice. And that's the one thing I do find is nice about the LeSS community, is that there's some good people trying to do good things, and it isn't all about the commercial aspect. So if there was one thing, this is an odd question to ask you,
Yeah.
because I'm assuming that you've probably already done this, what I'm about to say, if it would be, but if there's one thing about LeSS you could change, what would it be?
Well, I think you've figured out the answer already. If there's one thing about LeSS that I would like to change, then I would have changed it.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, a question that came to me earlier. If at any point in your journey in LeSS choosing you, did you ever doubt Scrum as the foundation?
Yes, I think more than once, and then I'll need to separate the what I would consider Scrum and the current written down description of Scrum, which are unfortunately not equal anymore. But even then, Scrum is Scrum is not something you'd like to do. it is, it is the structure that you require for creating and building a team. And it's not a purpose by itself. So therefore, if you could do away with it and get the same team dynamics or similar team dynamics, then that would be great. But getting there is very hard if you don't put something like Scrum in place. But if you then choose to say, okay, and that's what we've done in a way, we're going to identify with the tool Scrum to create nice, well-working teams, to provide that structure for the organization to build a team, and the original product owner team separation also gets us a bit out of contract game like dynamics, or should get us out of contract game dynamics. So if you choose that, then you also get with that all of the negative aspects of that, and that is the religiousness that people have for Scrum, or the religiousness that people have against Scrum, or the majority of the people, they have very poor Scrum experience, and they associate their experience with Scrum. Most of the LeSS, including the current one where I'm in, most of the LeSS adoptions where I come, in a way, the first year they go backwards, because they thought they were doing a bit of LeSS and Scrum, and then after a year they realized that what they called Scrum wasn't really much of Scrum yet. Right? So you take all of that negative things with it immediately, and that that that's the drawback of that. I guess I wouldn't change the decision, but there's definitely many times when I and also Craig, even more Craig perhaps, questioned that decision.
What made I suppose what made you stick with it then? Was it just a lack of alternative options, or was that why less then became a thing because you said, well, okay, well, Scrum on its own, we're not that satisfied, so well, we think it could be more suitable if we made some not changes, but we added to it.
To what? To Scrum itself?
To Scrum, yeah. I'm just wondering, yeah, why was it a lack of alternatives that made you stick with Scrum?
Not really. I think it's more the building on top of that basis probably helps us to go forward, and challenging that further just uh, doesn't it doesn't go forward very much. Right? By taking Scrum, we can say we'll just assume the in team dynamics are kind of done. We have a certain frame around that. We have the product on a product backlog structure. Considering that as a basis, what else is there around there? What else is important? Taking that as an assumption and removing that, I guess would have not been helpful.
Great. Thank you for that, Bars. I found that really interesting to listen to, actually. There's not a question that I'd ever thought of before, so thank you for taking time to answer it. But what in the Agile world was something that you felt should have been more popular than it was? Like a framework or a technique or an idea that never quite seemed to gain any traction?
I'm doubting between test-driven development and refactoring.
Mm. Okay. What's your doubt between them?
Which one of the two is? I mean, both of them are said to be very widespread. Like when I go in an organization and you say, "Are you doing refactoring?" They say yes. Are you doing test-driven development? They say yes. And then if you sit next to a team member and you pair up, then well, at least my definition of ruthless refactoring is different than what I see people do then, and my definition of short test-driven development loops is different than what I see people do, and therefore I often feel that both of these, they're obviously closely related. They're adopted more in checklist words than in reality.
Reminds me of what you were saying about Scrum earlier.
Yeah. But
Okay.
now that I'm thinking about the question further, and about the answer I've given so far, I think the limbo scaling technique could get a little bit more attention.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that.
There you go.
Case in point. I will look that one up. The limbo scaling
So that is
technique. Where?
so Kent Beck's has written about and from his perspective the way you should scale up and collaborate, and we've tried that out, and then you realize that earlier you thought you were working in small steps, but if you take the TCR in Limbo, so Kent's techniques, then you'll need to go a lot more disciplined still, and a lot smaller steps. And I have no hope that it will ever be seriously adopted for product development. But having it there and experiencing that way of working together for us has been very, very useful.
Wow. I think that's a brilliant answer. I'm going to be looking that up. I'll put it in the show notes. That's exactly the type of answer that I like from this question. To get to learn something new, something more to read about. Do you have what do you feel will be the next big thing in our communities?
I've kind of answered that already with the previous answers. I hope there will not be any next new thing, and that will take the things that have been there a little bit more serious.
Oh no, but is there anything that you're aware of? Any new practice or like team collaboration approach, or anything that you've kind of witnessed or heard of that you think, oh, okay, this might be useful and perhaps will be popular?
I'm trying very hard to think of something. No, I guess the next, and let's hope that will be the next new thing, is working with co-located teams.
Yeah, that'd be pretty groundbreaking.
We'll have to rediscover the benefits of working with co-located teams, because as you know, I've been working in a team remotely now for a year, and the longer I work in a team, the more I realize that there's just all of these things of being co-located that I'm missing out still. And even, and this is kind of some point that I nowadays try to make quite a lot, because there's a lot of people that like the popular news saying, yeah, from this now the hybrid working is here to stay, and but then they describe that as if that has no impact on how you work as a team. And even if you work in a hybrid way, that by itself already has a huge impact. It means that you'll need to limit the use of physical whiteboards, that you'll have to abandon physical task boards, that so I when the world is pretending that everything works fine um, with remote work or with hybrid work. And I guess the next big thing will be us discovering that it is not the same as working co-located.
I'm wondering if there has been some research done on this. I know there was a book by Price and Toy on Teams that's got some really interesting statistics about uh, the proximity of customers to teams, and then the subsequent impact on those teams' ability to perform. And there is I can't remember the exact statistic. I'll put it in the show notes. I'll dig it out. So I've got the book. That basically said that if you're in a team that has a close proximity to a customer, that you're something like a good proportionally about 30% more likely to become reach levels of high performance more quickly, or high value creation effectiveness more quickly than you would if you're not close to the customer. And I'm sure that there must be something in that book also about co-location. I'll look it up.
Yeah.
I'll let everybody know.
Well, I think the only reasonable study that I've seen so far is the Microsoft COVID remote working study. I think you might have seen that one also. It's very big, but it has some interesting effects. Like, it describes how especially the cross team communication goes down quite dramatically. One of the most interesting parts of that was that even the synchronous virtual meetings had, I believe, if I remember it correctly, had decreased, and the amount of asynchronous messaging had increased dramatically with remote working. And there's some other uh, just from their measurements of all of their teams, the changes in communication and behavior, and that was an interesting study.
I'll get it into the show notes so that people can also find that.
Yeah.
It is very interesting times that we've been through. I just hope that we can get some meaningful data out of this, and just because we've got the data doesn't mean that people will pay attention to it. Sadly, but,
I don't think there's been a lot of relationship with getting the data and people's behavior based on that.
let's not get drawn to a politics conversation. So we can save that for after we finish recording. Bart, it's been a absolute pleasure having you here on the podcast, on the show today, and getting to ask you some of these questions. We've gone through the standard questions around LeSS and Agile, and I suppose, and all it leaves us to talk about is what you've got coming up over the next few months that you would like to share with the people that are watching or listening. Is anything that, I mean, I know that obviously the elephant in the room is that you and I will be doing a course together in Manchester in the UK.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully that
That
will
is, of
happen.
course, March 2022. Bars and I will be in Manchester. I'll be co-training with Bars for the first time.
Yeah, I'm looking
Quite a
forward to
terrifying
that.
moment for me. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm
Yeah,
also very nervous because you're kind of like the boss.
yeah.
So I feel that, so I've got to build my best behavior. But that'd be great fun, and I'll put a link to where people can get tickets for that into the show notes. Other than the awesome course we're going to be doing together, Bars, is there anything else you'd like to share with the people watching and listening?
I don't know yet. There will, as I mentioned, there will be a lot of LeSS case studies that are in the pipeline that hopefully will be published this year. And then it looks like I'll be reducing my actual development work a little bit and focusing more on working with trainers and candidate trainers and the less friendly trainers, review material. Writing, hopefully my own case study should be one day finished after writing it now for I think, didn't I tell you that I was writing it the day we met or so?
I do seem to remember, mate. Yeah, perhaps. So, one day you're going to finish it, Bars, or you're going to finish it in one day? What's that going to be?
Well, if in one day would be good, but for now we'll just leave it in one day, and hopefully this year. And yeah, and I hope to be in especially in Netherlands participating a bit more in the Scrum and LeSS communities, and meeting more people here, in person, hopefully.
Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't have some in-person meetings? I can't wait. I haven't been to a LeSS conference in a couple of years because of because of COVID in school, so I can't wait to
Yeah,
kind of get
but
back into
they've
the swing
just
of some
continued.
normality.
They
They have done.
they're the only ones, I guess, who said, "Screw you, rest of the world. We're going to do a conference in person." That the Prague conference was quite nice. The Amsterdam was also nice, but it ended up small, and it at that time we thought we were very unlucky, but then it was 2 weeks before a full lockdown or so. So then, and 2 weeks later, we were like, oh, okay, well, it was actually a good timing because it still happened.
Perfect timing.
But yeah, there will be so for the listeners, there will be a LeSS conference in Berlin, hopefully this year, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, fantastic. I really want to be there. I really want to be there. It's been far too long. So, Buzz, we'll bring this to a close. I hope that you'll also be coming and doing a small talk of a Less Matters community. Perhaps shortly. We'll be I'm not sure on the date yet, but we'll get that publicised as well. So if you want to come along and ask Boz some questions or see what he's got to talk about, how we structure that, then please do make sure that you follow the Less Matters community on LinkedIn, or subscribe to this podcast for any more information about when that might be. So, Boz, unless there's anything on your mind that you would like to share to end this conversation today.
No, I think it's good.
Brilliant. Well, Bars, you've been fantastic. Thank you very much for going through these questions. I hope everyone that's listening has enjoyed it. And I look forward to welcome you to the next Less Matters podcast next month. So thank you very much for listening. Bars, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Stay safe and we'll see you soon.